Detroit city government is a service institution that recognizes its subordination to the people of Detroit. The city shall provide for the public peace, health, and safety of persons and property within its jurisdictional limits. The people have a right to expect aggressive action by the city's officers in seeking to advance, conserve, maintain, and protect the integrity of the human, physical, and natural resources of the city from encroachment and or dismantlement. The people have a right to expect city government to provide for its residents decent housing, job opportunities, reliable, convenient, and comfortable transportation, recreational facilities and activities, cultural enrichment, including libraries, art and historical museums, clean air and waterways, safe drinking water, and a sanitary, environmentally sound city. Keep it locked. The Black Detroit Democracy Podcast starts right after these messages.
Detroit 1 Million is a journalism project started by Sam Robinson that centers a generation of Michiganders growing up in a state without a city with 1 million people. Support the only independent reporter covering the 2025 Detroit mayoral race through the lens of young people. Good journalism costs. Visit Detroit1million.com to support Black independent reporting.
Wake up, Detroit. Welcome to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. Every week we open this podcast with a reading of the preamble to the Detroit City Charter, read by the one and only Bryce Detroit. The City Charter is our constitution which defines our rights and the way government should work. I'm Donna Gibbons-Davidson, President and CEO of the Eastside Community Network.
I'm Sam Robinson, founder of Detroit 1 Million.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our expanded effort to build another platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. The purpose of this podcast is to encourage Detroit citizens to stay vigilant in the fight for justice and equality, with a special call to action for Black Detroit. We seek to build awareness of our history as a gateway to freedom, a beacon for justice, and a laboratory of liberation. Welcome back to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. How are you today, Sam?
Oh, I'm so good. It's raining outside today. I've got to go to Shed 5 Eastern Market tonight for a District 5 candidate forum. You just met Renata Miller, you told me, before
I did.
We went on. She got a UAW endorsement.
She's a retired UAW. She listed a number of endorsements.
Yeah, they watch out for their own. And you know, these candidates are getting endorsements, but in District 5, to replace Mary Sheffield has been there. For a decade almost.
I think longer than a decade.
Longer than a decade.
Yeah.
What she got there?
I think 12 years 15? She got here. She was elected in the same cycle that Mike Duggan came to office.
Yeah, so we're going to get some new representation in District 5. I'm excited to see that tonight. Obviously, we just witnessed our first live televised mayoral debate with 4 of the 9 candidates. Some of those candidates weren't on stage. Channel 4 determined who was selected based on the poll that they conducted with the Detroit News. I think it was 10% margin of error, plus or minus 4. Mm-hmm. So Santil Jenkins, Solomon Kinlock, Mary Sheffield, and James Craig were on stage. And, oh, man, the gloves came off.
Yeah, I mean, they did. I was supposed to be there, but as I mentioned to you, I'm having some mobility issues, so I decided with a sore knee and some limping around to go home. I caught most of it on TV, but I missed maybe a few minutes. I thought it was good. I thought that there's something to be said, though, for allowing the marketplace of ideas to be there, even if a candidate doesn't have a greater chance of winning. The value of having these candidates there is that you get to hear all of their ideas. And there's certainly some voices that were missing from the debate, but I thought that there were some really strong arguments being made, and people walked away with some real strong feelings, I think.
You did, and, even without some of those voices, you heard some similar lines, some of the exact same lines being deployed. James Craig said, "We don't need a mayor who is going to need on-the-job training." We heard that from Santil from Fred Durhal.
Right.
And I messaged Durhal right after Craig said that, and you know what he told me is imitation is the best form of flattery. Fred Durhal and Todd Perkins were the candidates that most folks I talked to were upset and disappointed that they didn't see on the debate stage. It would have been really hard to get more than 4 candidates in there in an hour. And shout out to Jason, who moderated the debate. He did an excellent job. But it's very hard to articulate your entire thoughts, is what James Craig told me when I asked him why he wasn't able to get a lot of his answers fully off.
I thought he did a good job. I thought it was not excellent. And I also think that we needed more time for it. I think that we're having a debate here on Saturday. So shameless plug, Eastside Community Network, Outlier Media, and Authentically Detroit are having a debate here on Saturday. But one of our goals at this debate is to allow people's ideas to breathe and to allow for a little bit more back and forth. When there's disagreement, I don't just want to hear the pot shots. I want actually for people to spend some time explaining why they think what they think. There's a lot of information that was out there, and I'll give an example of something I thought didn't get enough attention. Santil talked about a penny Detroit tax, a Detroit penny tax, and she said it would raise $100 million. I'd like to see the evidence that it would raise $100 million because that certainly sounds good. What Mary said then was she countered with, number one, a desire to capitalize off of economic development downtown. In a previous forum or debate, Fred Durhal suggested that it would not raise enough money to make a difference. Then Mary said, I haven't seen his evidence either. And then then Mary also said, maybe a half penny tax for Detroiters, but she wanted to see a study to evaluate what the impact was on Detroiters. Well, let's talk about that. Those are 3 really interesting ideas, right? I forget what she called it. It's not a amusement tax. She had a different name, a sales option tax or something like that. A half penny tax and a penny tax. What is a penny tax? What would that mean economically for people? Let's talk about it. Don't just throw it out there, throw some numbers out there and move on. So I thought there was a little bit of missing information. I do think that his question about Mary's attendance was a question that she handled, I thought, very well. But I would have liked to hear from Santil whether Santil had really good attendance at every single committee meeting when she was council president, because you had another city council president there. And Mary said, no council president attends every meeting. Well, we've got one right here. Let's ask Santil, did you? Because sometimes people have cheap shots or sometimes people cover up information and it's hard to differentiate the truth. So either you walk away thinking Mary covered it well, or you just say she did a CYA kind of maneuver. There's no accountability.
Yeah, that story where that question came from, Deadline Detroit, I forget the author of the story.
Adolph Mongo.
Oh, that was Mongo that did that?
Yeah, I thought it was Adolph Mongo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't believe Mongo is currently working on anyone's campaign.
You didn't see his hit piece on Mary?
That's what I'm referencing now.
Yeah,
is he working for someone? Is he collecting money to do this?
Yes, it's Adolph Mongo. Mary Sheffield is not ready for prime time.
Adolph, there's a lot of people that don't show up to session. I mean, there are council members that don't go to Tuesday council meetings.
But understand this: if you are council president and you are an ex-official member of every single committee, then not showing up at a committee meeting, an ex-official member means, number one, that you are invited to the committee. I'm not even sure that, the vice president
she would have a role.
She would have a role. What is her role?
Right.
And when you have actual committee chairs, the committee chairs have a bigger role. I think Adolph Mongo, you have to know his history. Adolph Mongo is for sale. So even if he's not telling you who's paying him,
right,
he doesn't do it for free. I'll tell you a story, if you've been around Detroit politics long enough, when Kwame Kilpatrick was running the second time, I believe he was running against Freeman Hendricks. And in his fight against Freeman Hendricks, Adolph Mongo came out against Kwame Kilpatrick. And there was a lot of talk at this time about some of his actions in his first term. And then all of a sudden, he and Horace Sheffield, who also was coming out against Kwame Kilpatrick, were hired by the Kilpatrick campaign. And Adolph Mongo put together a whole narrative around a high-tech lynching. He purchased an ad on the front page of the Michigan Chronicle showing a graveyard with black men being lynched to try to suppress criticism of Kwame Kilpatrick and suggest that somehow this was, consistent with a brutality. And the first person who came up with this high-tech lynching was actually Clarence Thomas. And so I really, really, really reject the narrative of criticizing black men who are political in the political space amounts to a high-tech lynching. They're not being killed. They're being criticized.
We've heard similar things about Eric Adams from his camp and those defending him.
Yeah, I mean, it's always
New York City mayor.
We defend, when you're defending people like Eric Adams against a high-tech lynching, then you have to ask yourself, what does lynching mean? Okay. But it's always, to me, a cheap shot. And there's other ways to do it. He was not running against a white man. He was running against another black man. Freeman Hendricks is not white. And so the idea that somehow he was being lynched for criticizing him, and the majority of voters in Detroit who were also criticizing him were lynching him, is a distortion of history and a minimization of what lynching really was. But at any rate, it was his hit piece. It was cheap to me, and it's just filled with cheap shots. But that's what he does. And, I just think that we should be very careful at not assuming because somebody has not said, I'm working with this candidate, somebody's paying him.
It's interesting how this time of clickbait and soundbite and vertical video, 12-second video, it's interesting that folks like Adolph Mongo in that sort of agenda-driven journalism, it's not more prevalent in Detroit. Perhaps I'm completely wrong. But, I haven't seen as many of those type of, gets everyone talking about this thing. I went live to 500 people after the debate, and several people were talking about the Adolph Mongo story. I don't know Jason Corthrope's, level of understanding how that story came together to ask Mary. I think she was a little surprised after I talked to her after the debate that he actually brought that up even.
Right. Because he should have known better. And I think that, a really good journalist would understand the nuance. That doesn't excuse her from missing meetings, right? But it does add some nuance. And it's one of those questions that, to me, was a little bit just based on, you can't let Adolph Mongo be your source.
I know. And there are real criticisms about showing up and being places that Mary has. And I'll bring it, on the air right now. There's one criticism that I hear of Mary Sheffield, that she doesn't stay very long at the events that she's invited to. I mean, I've witnessed it. She's a busy person, being the council president, and she has a driver that, and oftentimes she's driving herself around. But that's something that people at organizations that are very excited to have the city council president and then are sort of disappointed, surprisingly, that she had to leave a little bit early. That's a criticism that I think is rooted more in reality than Adolph's.
Exactly. And we've had that concern with Mary, to be honest with you, and called her out about it, right? When we had our East Side Summit in 2023, Mary was one of the speakers on a panel, and she promised she would show up. She didn't. And Orlando called her up. We went live, and she called up, and she was trying to, explain and, whatever. I think that is a bad pattern of behavior. And I think holding her accountable for that pattern of behavior is separate from what we see here. Yeah, and I've heard that from some other people.
Completely separate. And I mean, the remedies for solving that are also kind of, time management and getting a schedule planner or what have you. You guys got to understand. I mean, if you're a city council person, let alone the city council president, you're being invited to an event every single night. And it is so easy, even as a journalist, to overextend yourself and say yes, 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 and then realize, oh, shoot, I just said yes to 3 things that are happening all in the same day.
And not to make an excuse, but some of us just have a really hard time saying no.
Yeah.
I say yes to things, and I don't go sometimes. Like, I didn't go to the debate. I was like, I just can't do it. I said to my husband, we had tickets, and I said, if you really want to go, but I don't think I don't feel good enough to go. And I certainly don't want to be walking around with this bad knee. which I have to have physical therapy. I have to wear a special brace for my knee. And, so I didn't go. When I was in Mackinac, I missed some things because of my knee, and I had difficulty walking around. And so on the other side, people who thought I was going to be there would say, well, Donna's not showing up. And I'm not making an excuse. I'm not city council president. I think also the final thing I'm going to say is Mary shows up some places all the time, and some places she doesn't. So I think that, if you talk to people at Mac Development, she's always there.
Right.
They say she's always there for us. I think also there's an equity thing where you want to make sure that you're showing up for everybody all of the time and not just your people. But, I just didn't really like that comment.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, sometimes when you make the wrong criticism, the right criticism gets lost in the sauce.
Yeah. There was talking about pot shots and cheap shots. One shot, or should I say 3 shots, let out by Santil Jenkins at the end during her closing remarks. She told the audience, if you want a future that includes more guns in schools, locking up our kids, James Craig is your guy. If you want a part-time mayor who will be working 2 full-time jobs, Kinloch is ready. If you want a mayor who shows up on Instagram but doesn't show up for meetings, referencing the Adolph Mongo story, then follow Mary.
Yeah.
And it was quite I think I got more than 10,000 views in a tweet version of that, and everyone was,
people loved it. But I'm going to say this. I've been at ECN. Not everybody. I've been at ECN since 2016. And we have lots and lots of community meetings. I'm sure you've been here. I've been to community meetings in many places. I have not seen Santil until she decided to run for office. And my criticism of candidates, I had this conversation with another candidate. It's not just her. I have this conversation with candidates all the time. If you're running for office, don't just show up when you're running. Don't just show up when you want money. Show up because you care about this community. She left city council and she says, well, at that time, everything was pretty much decided, so it was a good time to leave. In 2013, look what happened. The next year, we had a record number of water shutoffs, such that the United Nations came here and declared it a human rights violation. Between 2013 and now, we had so many homes that were taken for tax foreclosure. We have so many people living without heat. We have so many people living without resources. We've had blackouts and we've had all kinds of emergencies in this city. We had all of COVID-19, and Santil has not been in these streets all this time. And so if I want somebody to show up when they want something, now that's what I would have said if I was married, but of course I'm not married. I would have said, if you want somebody to show up when you want something, choose Santil because she's back in town right now. And yes, she's helped people by administering thaw funds. And I think that that's great that thaw has administered funds. But despite the funds that thaw has administered, we still have people living in homes without heat and warmth. We still have people living in homes without water. We still have people living in homes that are in dangerously poor repair.
And DTE keeps raising our bills. Our utility bills are getting out of control. Which one of the regulators are going to say something? And it appears, if you follow Craig Monger's reporting, that they're trying to oust actively one of the regulators at the Public Service Commission that is trying to raise concerns.
Well, I mean, the Public Service Commission was asleep on the job for a while, and they've just, they're starting to slowly rouse back to awakening. But I think we have to understand that we have some of the least reliable energy in the nation. It takes longer for it to turn back on, and some of the highest rates in the nation, and they keep raising them. And our utilities are also publicly traded. And so in October of 2023, I believe, and don't kill me if I got the dates wrong, but in October of 2023 or thereabouts, DTE distributed about $700 million to its shareholders, and then turned around a few months later and asked for a hike in energy bills to cover a $400 million shortfall. Now, you don't have to be a mathematician to understand that if they had given away $300 million, we wouldn't need to have this increase. And the explanation, when I did ask some DTE folks about it, they said, well, retirees, all of these people depend on DTE, these shares to make them profit. And so there's a move by many organizations, including, volunteers not politicians, which I sit on the board of, to talk about changing regulations to publicly traded monopolies, which, DTE is. It's not as though you can decide, I'm not going to purchase DTE energy.
Right.
You have it. I was taking the survey and they were like, would you recommend DTE? To who? You don't have a choice, right? So I think her affiliation with DTE and even the fact that Santil called out DTE was problematic. Now, she did have some good answers, and I don't want to minimize that. But the other thing I thought was a little bit weird was this is where experience counts. This is where experience counts. Not one person on that stage has the experience of being mayor. Not one person on that stage has the experience of fixing injustice. And Pastor Kinlock, everything you talk about how people haven't done anything. I used to run a church-based nonprofit community development corporation. You know what we did? We built housing. We did economic development in our neighborhoods. We did all of that. And we also did charity. You've passed out computers. You've passed out food. What have you built? What have you created? You're going to create 10 grocery stores. Have you created one? If you have 35,000 members, you're telling me you can't do one thing? I think it's not that I'm criticizing him or Craig or Santil. I think it's important, though, that we don't hold our opponents to standards we ourselves have not met. This idea that a child died in a parking garage because of Mary Sheffield not doing what she was supposed to do is offensive. Our entire system around housing is broken, and not a single mayor can guarantee that children will not be homeless next year. Now, maybe they won't die because most of the time, or maybe they will die and it just won't make the paper, right? But I think that, maybe they'll be in foster care. Maybe they'll be shunned around that way, or, there's other kinds of outcomes that happen. But let's really hold people accountable for realistic and reasonable things and not just use this as pot shots.
Yeah, there was some oohs when Solomon Kinlock responded after James Craig said, gloves are off, let's go. He said, I don't mind that. Kinlock, sort of brought a level of decorum back into the room. He said, I think some folks on the stage tonight have forgotten that construction is not destruction, and building oneself up does not include tearing others down.
But what has he done? He said, you haven't done your job. Listen, when I was I'll talk about Vanguard, right? Community Development Corporation. But by the way, Vanguard Community Development Corporation was started by Second Ebenezer Church in a building that Kinlock now occupies. That's when Second Ebenezer was there. Is there a Triumph Community Development Corporation I haven't heard about? Okay. So one of the things we did, even before we had after-school program, the after-school program at Second Ebenezer, when some children were left behind, and I think a parent was arrested for leaving their children behind, from Flicks Elementary School, the foreign language and immersion school, which is right down the street from Second Ebenezer at the time, right on East Grand Boulevard. Pastor Van at that time started an after-school program so that parents at Flicks could have their children picked up from his place because he understood children would come there late. We then started an after-school program at Sherrard Elementary School. We then started working at Northern High School. We have offered summer jobs. We built over 100 units of housing. We created the Milwaukee Junction Small Business Center, which helps small businesses develop. This is, of course, under my tenure, which I'm very proud of, from 1999 until 2007. And then more stuff has been done since then. You don't have to be mayor for your church to help facilitate some of the solutions that you're talking about. If you've been in a school and you've brought your church into a school, not for a one-day motivational or mentoring program, but actually programs inside of schools helping children learn, then you have a stake in that conversation. If it's all about what you're going to do, then you are no different than the rest.
Yeah, I think that the response and reactions to Kinlock's response to Santil almost might take, from his supporters, and even some that don't support Solomon Kinlock. Afterward, people were asking, is this going to help or hurt her? And I don't know if I have an answer yet. I think Gen Z and millennials who loved what she said vote a lot less than the folks that do not love what she said and that were sort of like, thank you, Solomon Kinloch, after he said what he did.
After I was talking to Renata Miller yesterday, while leaving my daughter's house, and had a brief conversation with her about the debate. And the thing she said is that some of her family members feel that Mary is too young, which, ageism, right? And then the other thing is some of them will never forgive Santil for the way that she left, the older folks in her family. And so I think, again, that, when you throw stones and you're living in a glass house, don't be surprised when some stones get thrown back. And some people have very, very strong memories about that. And that's not to say that I think Santil could be a decent mayor. I think Mary could be a decent mayor. I think they are two of the both of them seem to be more policy focused and more specific in how they'll do things. I really like the fact that Santil did her bus riding thing, and I've been looking at her ideas around transportation, and I like it. So I think that she has good ideas. I just don't know that that's the way to move forward, and I really hate to see women attacking each other and not really dealing with the issues, but that's me. Two things I noticed, though. We've been preparing our own debate questions. None of the debates, none of the forums, and none of the candidates has really expressed a viewpoint on water affordability. What is your view on water affordability? Again, in 2014, we had over 80,000 homes have their water shut off. Now, recently, we had the Lifeline program, which Mary helped to create, and Santil supported, according to documentation. But that Lifeline program has expired, and now people's homes are subject to water shut off again. And people like my friend Monica Lewis Patrick at We the People of Detroit. Did I get her name right? Anyway, Monica at We the People of Detroit certainly has a very strong viewpoint on water affordability and the need to enshrine that in law. Under, I want to say, Joanne Watson's leadership on City Council, they actually passed a water affordability plan that was never made into law. And so I want to know, where do you stand on that? Is water a human right? And if it's a human right, how do we fix the laws and policies to make sure that people's rights are being exercised? The second thing I don't see anybody talking about is environmental racism, environmental justice. We have in our community the highest asthma rate in the nation, and that's directly impacted by all of the concentration of industry and the failure to buffer and protect our communities from environmental harm. We have ozone that is out of control. We've got flooding, and flooding is leaving homes in really bad repair. So I want to ask the kinds of questions that also deal with issues that don't make it to WDIV or to the debate stage, but I'm also concerned that none of the candidates has really brought them up on their own. Those are not planks in their campaigns, and I think they should be.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what else I haven't heard. Haven't heard anything about reparations or the city's reparations task force that Mary Sheffield played a pivotal part in creating and appointing Keith Williams to. Keith Williams, he got mad at me for quoting him saying that Triumph Church is a circus. So I'll say it again here. Maybe he'll get mad again, and maybe not. I don't know if he's listening. But haven't heard anybody talk about how that is going. I understand Sydney Calloway left. She was a co-chair. And so I don't know.
They keep losing co-chairs.
It's because they know what's coming. What's coming, Donna? A lawsuit. They're not going to get this they're going to get tied up in courts.
The reality is that I don't think reparations will be decided by governmental bodies. I think studying reparations and building awareness of them, fine. But you're not going to get real reparations in a state that doesn't believe in affirmative action and does not allow for certain things to move forward, and certainly not in this nation at this time. I think that what I want to know is, what kinds of information have you uncovered? How can we educate the community on some of the issues that people should be aware of related to the history and functioning and systems of this city? I think it was never going to be a successful thing, but certainly if you appoint Keith Williams over as co-chair, it's not going to succeed because he doesn't play well with other people.
Why haven't we heard that as a criticism from any of the other candidates?
Oh, because I think that, first of all, why are you going to take that on?
Right.
I think Keith Williams is the chair of the Michigan Black Democrats, and nobody really wants to go up against that. I don't know that any of the candidates wants to touch reparations with a 10-foot pole.
I know. That Mike Duggan doesn't either. Has he even referenced it at all once? I'm not sure.
Listen, I guess my thing.
The governor has told me that she supports the will of the Detroit residents in their plans.
In 2020, we had Black Lives Matter protests all over the nation, actually all over the world, right? And in Detroit, James Craig, acting under Mike Duggan's authority, shut down the protest in the city of Detroit. And the city of Detroit came up with a nice slogan, and they had this street mural, "Power to the People." And everybody's like, that's great. Yeah. Because this mayor will not say black. This mayor will not acknowledge racism. This mayor will not acknowledge any kind of systemic injustice. And in fact, when you talk about, he says that's divisive, which is what Republicans say as well. And that's why I was not surprised he was running independent. The idea that speaking about injustice is divisive is something that people who have a lot of resources want to say, because it shuts down any kind of conversation about spreading the wealth or sharing opportunity. So, all right. But, we have so many things to talk about.
We do
want to talk about something that happened last week. And speaking of protest, when we come back, let's talk about No Kings and the role of Black people in Detroit and across the world in participating in these marches.
Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The MASH Detroit Small Business Hub is a 6,000 square feet space available for members, residents, and businesses and organizations. To learn more about rental options at MASH Detroit, contact Nicole Perry at nperry@ecn-detroit.org or 313-331-3485. Have you ever dreamed of being on the airwaves? Well, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network is here to make those dreams come true. Formerly known as the Deep Network and located inside the Stoudemire, the Authentically Detroit Podcast Network offers studio space and production staff to help get your idea off of the ground. Just visit authenticallydet.com and send a request through the contact page.
So, the day of or the day before the No Kings March, several young people that I know were really upset with young African-American people with a post by Sherry Gay Daniego saying, "Dear Black people, don't participate in the No Kings March, sit home, don't let ICE, whatever." And she, went on this rant. And some of them felt like, wait a minute, this is a school board member. And about 14% of Detroit school children are Latinx. Is this okay?
She said, no disrespect, but what we're not about to do is turn the focus of Juneteenth to immigration.
Well, she also said that's a separate one,
yeah, which
is really offensive. Do we get all of June for Juneteenth? I mean, Juneteenth is June 19th, but
it's also Men's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Well, so you're not going to turn that to Juneteenth. I mean, I think the reality is that freedom is freedom. And when I think about what's happening right now with people being arrested for assisting people who are being actively, hounded and deported, people giving them shelter and you can go to prison, I can't help but think of slave catchers. I can't help but think of Black people living illegally in places like Detroit.
Are using the word Gestapo to describe ICE.
Right. Well, Gestapo, before you had Gestapo, you had slave catchers in the city of Detroit. Remember Hitler modeled
he did.
his behavior in Germany after how Black people were treated in the United States. He took it a step further, with the concentration camps as he set them up. But we have to be honest that people existed illegally in this nation for reasons that had nothing to do with justice and had nothing to do with immigration. It had to do with you're not legal unless you are working on this farm under control of somebody. And actually, look what's happening now. I don't know if you saw a little known news. It was in the news last week or this week. I don't know when it was. When Trump said he's thinking about stopping enforcement of immigration, violations on farms and in places,
Republican states?
Just in places that employ people who are brought here illegally. He's not going to enforce this there anymore. So all of the people who own these, large farms, they're going to be able to have them work there, and they're not going to have to worry about ICE coming to their farms.
I thought he said that in Republican states.
But he didn't say that. I don't think he said that in Republican states, but maybe he did. But I think
it was an addition.
Maybe he said that in addition. He said in another thing that he was going to really bring ICE to Democratic states and Democratic cities. But I didn't hear him say that about the farmers, So I would imagine that if there's farmers that are brought here illegally in Michigan to farm and enrich white folks, they're not going to deport them either. But I want you to think about the optics of this. You're working on this. We'll call it a plantation or farm or whatever you want to call it. You're working here, and you're safe. You can be here legally as long as you work here. The minute you leave, you're illegal and you are subject to deportation. Think about the historical idea of you can be here legally as long as you're working here. But when you step out of here, you're now illegal and you're subject to some type, or you're actually subject to return. In that instance, beating, maiming, whatever you want to do, killing, you don't have any rights. So if you have these people whose presence here is only justified by the fact that they're working for people, they're here without legal status, which means that they don't have any legal rights for minimum wage, occupation safety and health, weekends, child labor. None of those things are in place as long as you're working on this place, because if you organize or you complain, then you can be fired not working here. And you understand what I'm saying? It's an exploitable labor force. And I'm not saying it's the same thing as slavery. I'm just saying it's not that much different than slavery. And so for Black people to align themselves or to believe that this is okay because it's not us, here are the arguments. Well, those people, they're racist. They don't like us anyway, because this one person said this, or this happened to me this one time. So we've decided an entire population of people.
It's very much what white people do to Black people when they're being racist to them.
Yeah. It's what did they call that? Collective guilt, collective responsibility. One Black person does something and Black people are wrong. And then here's the other thing. If they didn't want this, they could have voted for Kamala Harris. Well, number one, if you're here illegally, you don't get to vote.
Right.
Number two, there's a whole lot of Black folks who didn't vote for Kamala Harris too. Are we also thinking they don't have rights? I mean, are they disinvited to the picnics? I mean, I think, you're not coming to my picnic. But I think that the amount of hypocrisy, the amount of siding with people who are unjust is disgusting. You don't have to march. Nobody mandated that Black folks come out to the march. There's some people in various places who have complained that Black people aren't showing up. Okay, but they don't speak for everybody. But to say, stay home, don't worry about these people, it's not your problem, they don't like us anyway, feels like you're playing into Trump's hands.
Marcus Kelly, I met outside of the federal courthouse earlier this week. He's the founder of Charge Up Midnight Coalition. He told me he was invited by Michigan United. They are an immigrants' rights organization. I asked him, what he thought about this conversation. He told me he felt like, when they come for your brothers and sisters at night, they come for us in the morning, he said. If we allow them to do this to our neighbors, it's going to continue happening to us. Tyrone Carter, he's a state rep.
Running for Gabby's seat.
Southwest Detroit. Running for District 6, challenging Gabriela Santiago Romero, who we also talked to this week at City Council. This last week. This week at City Council, she is sort of listening to racist abuse against her, telling her that she should be deported, and telling her, it's like there's like a group of public commenters who target Gabby and harass her online. Tyrone Carter is challenging Gabby for the District 6 City Council seat. He agreed with Kelly that it's in Black people's fabric to support other groups facing persecution. He told me on the Michigan House floor last Thursday, he compared Trump's deportation efforts to the 1994 crime bill. You know who else did that recently? He was wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit when he did it. It was Kanye West. He's like, let's like they're taking the fathers out of the homes. That's what ICE do. He's like, I got love for Trump, but the ICE thing, I don't agree with that. He said. You know. And Tyrone Carter is talking to me. He's like, they're going through what black folks went through 40 or 50 years ago. In my mind, I'm like, you mean 30 or 40 years ago? But nevertheless,
you know, this first of all, they've always gone through this.
Yeah. Right.
This is not new. There's been Operation Wetback is in the 1950s where they deported Mexicans. We aren't aware. I mean, there's nobody in the United States that's aware. I actually did some research, and I'm going to be working on something with this soon about the many freedom struggles that have taken place on these shores by Native Americans, by Mexicans, by Chinese Americans, by Arab Americans. To be in this United States, to not be wealthy and white, is to be a person who needs to fight for freedom, whether you are Appalachian, whether you are a worker, whatever you are, the fight for freedom is there. And Black people have certainly shown up and shown solidarity with other people. And I admire ancestors for the work they've done. Martin Luther King was there. I know that Malcolm X was there and Paul Robeson was there and many, many other people. You know, when Irma Henderson started the Women's Conference of Concerns, it was a multiracial, multi-ethnic movement around justice. And my grandmother was involved in that. But other people have been fighting struggles that the majority of Black people have not even known about. No group of people was voted more heavily in favor of Trump than white people. But we're angrier at Latino people. We're angrier at Muslims. We're angrier at other people of color.
And that coalition is starting to break down. I mean,
it's intentionally being broken down.
White folks, you know, the power, they don't seem to easily give it up to other groups. You see the abandoned Harris group that backed Trump, now facing the threat of nuclear war or war in Iran and Israel, say, you know, if you do this, Trump, you're going to, you know, what if he runs again in 2028? What can you guys do now? I mean, he's the second term president, but they're warning the Trump administration, you better not do this. You know, we signed on and helped elect you. You hear from Ryan Garcia, he's a boxer, say, you know, what's happening with ICE and is terrible. You see this woman, she was a singer. There's a song, I will vote for Trump.
Yep.
Yeah, you see her husband
is not
getting
what you're voting for.
Yes, her husband is getting deported. And you talk about civil war. Steve Bannon, he was the former campaign manager of the 16. He's a podcaster now. He went to prison for defrauding people, but he's out and he has a popular podcast. He was talking to Tucker Carlson, who is going to make waves this week with his interview with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz doesn't know the population of Iran. Steve Bannon predicted that what's going to happen, what's going to take place in the next weeks and months. He described it as a civil war within the big cities over ICE. And you see Brad Lander and you see the senator out of California get arrested or detained. I think in places like Chicago and New York, Los Angeles, we're going to see politicians begin to, you know, lock arms with these immigration rights attorneys and activists, and you're going to see some political theater.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing television and the corporate news loves better than political theater. Before we move on, though, I heard some news from you that you are with where? What are you doing?
Yes, I joined the Michigan Chronicle. I'm going to help them out in doing some mayoral coverage for them. I really am excited. I saw my name, my story that I was really proud of doing. I had a story. You can go look up this Black Detroiters debate support for non-citizens facing deportation, where we talked to Marcus Kelly, but referenced Sherry Gay's posts on Facebook. Seeing your name in print, it's a good feeling. Really, sort of distressing news if you are, employed at the Detroit News and Free Press this week with the news that the Joint Operating Agreement, or JOA, that combined the business operations of both newsrooms together that will expire and will not be renewed. And so both newspapers are going to be, continuing on independently of one another. What that will mean for the future of the sustainability of the print product, what that will mean for the amount of employees that both papers are going to hire. You can go read about that on Detroit1million.com. Just published something today. A longtime employee told me he described it as a dark day in the history of both newspapers and journalism in Detroit. And so it's important to me that I'm, as many places that I can be. And shout out to Hiram. Shout out to Jeremy Allen. Jeremy used to work at MLive before I got there. I started at MLive in 2020.
So I just want to say I'm really proud of you.
Well, thanks.
I'm really happy for you.
I'm in a little bit of a better. The people have been really supporting me to the point of I've been able to buy food and gas and do my life still. So I'm good.
You're not yet making $400,000.
Not $400,000 a year. You can look up the 1099 whatever form that is. Not making Center for Michigan numbers. No.
Yeah, I'm really happy for you though, and I think that it's important that we have independent journalists and journalists who really have been in the trenches representing us, and so great job. But going back to Civil War, I don't think it's going to be. I think actually the No Kings rallies really demonstrated the resistance of people, and I think most people of all backgrounds supported this and felt pretty good about it. I think that you have some voices that are divisive, and those divisive voices are getting drowned out. I'm really excited about something we're doing here on Friday, which is a unity breakfast, and where we're bringing folks together. If you want to come and cover that, you can.
What time?
It's from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Where we're just bringing various groups together and say, let's be unified. Let's care about each other. Let's work together. And really from the grassroots up, do what our ancestors did and find ways to, we have a coalition. What people like Trump do is they play all of us against each other, even, whether it's anti-Semitism, every time a Muslim person speaks up on behalf of their own people, whether it is Mexican people taking black jobs, he likes doing that. Whether it's Haitians eating people. I don't want to forget this point either, though, because it's so important. I bring it up every time.
Eating dogs and cats.
Eating dogs and cats, not people. I mean, we haven't gotten there yet. Sorry, folks. A little slip of the tongue. I think it's important that we understand the fragility of Black and brown people in this nation who are not Latin American. That we look at the African nations that are also facing deportation, afraid of deportation. I have an extended family member who is a permanent citizen, afraid to get her visa renewed and really having some issues, personal issues as a result of that because of the threat. And it impacts, those things are spreading all throughout there. The way news media reports it, it's Mexican people and it's Latin American people, and they are certainly overrepresented. But there are other people of color who are also being underrepresented, other people who we should have some type of, care for. And so it concerns me that we are, some of us are going into these little bubbles, but what really made me happy was the number of people, young people who just came straight out and said to Aya Walker Bay is one, Imani Perry is another, who said, this is not acceptable. We may even need to recall you from your school board position if you don't stop attacking people who represent some of the students, or look like some of the students you're supposed to represent. Yeah, that's the news.
I'm getting text messages that there's ICE arrests happening on the street that I live on Ferry Street right now.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I am really sorry to hear that. It's really scary.
Yeah, it is. It's a scary time, and we don't know, what cities are going to be targeted. Obviously, the Trump administration is making this a whole show. Kristi Noem is coming to Detroit on Friday, a part of her America's Future tour. She's going to be talking with law enforcement and Michiganders about the threat of Canadians, the open Canadian border, she describes it as. Haven't heard many people talk about any threat of anything coming over the
No. How many gun manufacturers are there in Canada? How many gun manufacturers are there? We act as though we are not producing fentanyl here. We're not doing these things here. The position of American innocence. One of the things, I had a conversation with another family member on Father's Day, and we were talking about, where a lot of this is coming from. And we have to acknowledge the fact that people all over the United States are in pain. In small towns and big cities and suburbs, you have a lot of people who are really struggling emotionally. We have high suicide rates, high drug addiction rates, high unemployment rates, high bankruptcy rates all over this nation. And the question is, who do we get to blame? It's not as though everybody's doing well. What the Trump administration has done is laid blame for everything at the feet of people who are the most vulnerable in our society, and those are people who are here illegally, and saying they're the ones who are causing this. As if, even with the crime bill, I'm glad that Tyrone Carter brought that up, because even with the crime bill, the black people who were getting arrested for selling crack weren't the people who were bringing it into this nation, really getting rich and manufacturing crack. They were the people at the tail end of a lot of these systems. And the same thing with the people who we're rounding up and blaming for everything. They are not the ones who are causing a lot of these social problems, but you need somebody to blame. And Donald Trump has been very good, and MAGA has been very good at harnessing all that blame on very vulnerable people. The other thing I was reading, and it's a concern of mine, I don't know if you saw this, that the suicide hotline is no longer going to support LGBTQ organizations and young people people who are suicidal, who are LGBT. The federal suicide hotline is no longer going to support them. And, that's coming from hate and blame and anger and all of these things that we have the power to address. But I don't think we're going to address it through more hate and anger and blame. I think we've got to address it by really trying to find common ground, trying to find common solutions, and, to the extent humanly possible, having compassion for other people who are suffering right now. What are you learning?
Oh my God, I'm in disbelief right now, honestly. And it's interesting, we talked to Gabby Santiago Romero after council, after she is, sort of the target of racist abuse against her, knowing that, when she goes back into her community, these are the messages that she's getting.
Well, I think
there's a raid happening, there's an arrest happening here, there's this happening here, and it's just overwhelming thinking about. This is
who is
real
she
people.
getting this from? Is she getting this from other Detroiters, or is she getting it from sort of this?
Her community. I mean, the people in Southwest have a very tight knit. They're on group chats and they'll share Instagram stories. I saw an Instagram story last week, and understand that it's hard for news reporters to all the time stay on top of these issues. DHS, ICE, the immigration enforcement right now is not responding to our messages, at least not my communications. I think I've sent a handful of questions since Trump's election. They used to be responsive under the Biden administration.
All right. Well, listen, I hate to cut this short. I always love talking to you. I think you're doing great work, and I look forward to reading more of your stories. We're going to have to start
there's
rolling
going to be a
some of them
ton.
out.
There's going to be a lot of really juicy, sort of talker. We do the word on the street. I'm going to do a lot of those word on the street stories, trying to get the real pulse and the real conversations. And I think that's what we try to do here. So I appreciate it. But
so
again,
you've got two. Jenkins drops gloves. Correct times out. 4 takeaways from the Detroit mayoral debate. That's one. And the other one was the one that you just mentioned about the division. Oh, goodness.
Yes, the discussion, the debate rather, within Black Detroiters households over whether or not we should be supporting non-citizen undocumented immigrants. I have a few others too. Last week I started. So I went to Lansing and talked to Sarah Anthony about supporting CVI. We initially thought that those community violence intervention groups are going to get a significant amount out of the Public Safety Trust Fund legislation. That is not going to go through. Senate Democrats are holding that up because they want police accountability. Matt Hall does not. I ask Matt Hall, I say, well, you just told me that, you liked the idea of the database to keep problem officers from jumping from department to department. Jeremy Moss is actively reintroducing that legislation. You can go watch him. I think Ross Jones on Channel 7 just did a piece on that. So they've been open to sort of parts of police accountability measures, but obviously as a whole, they're trying to weed out the woke policies like early release.
Please don't use those words.
I'm using Matt Hall's words.
Please don't repeat those words.
Which I did not hear when I heard it in Lansing with Todd Bedison standing right behind him. I did not hear what's the other one?
Yeah, just
I didn't hear him in Detroit when he came and met with Duggan and had a room full of Detroit and Wayne County and stakeholders at the police headquarters on 3rd Street. They steered clear of that sort of language.
Well, they do, because the word language is anti-Black. It's taking language that was created and used in a Black community for a very positive, purpose, stay woke, meaning stay aware, and using it to justify harming us. And so the weaponization of the word woke is really, it just hits me where I live. And I understand where you're using it is what he's using.
You want to know, too, on the internet, a lot of the people on the left have reappropriated and are now deploying it back against what they call the woke right.
Exactly.
Or dark woke, being like
sleep.
Embarrassingly cruel to the right. Like
they are.
That's dark woke.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying wake up, right? Still saying wake up, Detroit, because we have a responsibility to be awake and to continue loving each other, continue showing care, hold people accountable. I'm optimistic, and I want to close with this. I'm optimistic that whoever wins, unless it's Craig, will have a better Detroit than we do right now. Right. I mean, anybody who says I'm going to pick up the phone and call, Trump scares me. But I'm optimistic that we're going to have a better Detroit, that all of the candidates are talking about things that matter. And it's up to us to hold them accountable once they're elected. I'm really looking forward to Saturday. Hopefully you can cover that.
Yes, I will be there. We're gonna have a story on that. Yeah. If you're a council candidate right now and you want to talk to me, I'm going to just give you my number. It's 989-488-0008. A lot of folks have been emailing me, messaging me on Twitter and Instagram. If you're listening right now and you are a candidate and want to talk to me about your campaign, give me a call. I am here in Detroit.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Black Detroit Democracy Podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. And, of course, support Black independent reporting and the Michigan Chronicle on Detroit1million.com, because good journalists cost.
Thank you.